I would like to bring on stage Tim Elde, who will be talking to Mattias from Moonfire Ventures and Gyula from Oktogon Ventures. Tim, welcome, and all the best video talk.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate the intro. For everyone at home, we're really fortunate today to have about 30 minutes of Gyula Feher and Mattias Ljungman's time. Like Marion said, Gyula is a founding partner of Oktogon Ventures, and Mattias is a founding partner of Moonfire Ventures. If Mattias and Gyula, if you can come on stage, that'd be awesome. Hey, Mattias.
Hey, hello.
Good to see you. Let's see if Gyula can appear. Hey, Gyula. Awesome. Well, we're kind of clued up on what you're doing at the moment, but it'd be quite nice if we could quickly go around and hear what you were doing immediately before founding your respective VC firms. Gyula, do you mind saying what you were doing before?
Yeah, sure. I used to be an entrepreneur, founder myself. I had a company called Ustream, which was basically a video streaming company. And, it was the typical startup life cycle, raise money from Softbank, among others. And then luckily it all ended well by us getting acquired by IBM. I stayed on for 3 years, and then I, tried my skills in the other side of the business, which is early stage investing in my case.
Awesome. Thanks, Gyula. And Mattias?
Yeah, so prior to, as they mentioned before in the introduction, prior to founding Moonfire, I was involved in founding Atomico. So I'm a serial sort of fun founder, it seems like. And it's been amazing. It's been an amazing ride. I've been part of the European ecosystem now for 20 years, and my God, has it changed. And it's been an exciting time with lots of great founders coming out, and I think that you're just getting a stronger and stronger new generation. But Atomico, yeah, multi-billion fund, and I was fortunate to be involved in driving deals like within Klarna as one of them, Supercell, Climate Corp, and others. But yeah, it's just great to me. I just love working with founders really at the beginning and supporting them as sort of the first money in.
So to that point, do you want to kind of give us the details around what Moonfire Ventures is then?
Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, Moonfire is a 60 million seed fund focused on pre-seed and seed across Europe. We focus on 4 different areas. It's capital and finance as main ones, so around like fintech, for example. You're also looking at future of work, which we think is going through tremendous change, as well as e-health. So any tools that help with the healthcare system. And then finally, the area that I focus a lot on is gaming and community as well. So I've had a lot of interest in that market. So, but we aim to also be a little bit of a different firm. We see that how you use data and how you use software to build your fund is extremely important. So the ecosystem has grown a lot over the last 10 years, but particularly in the last few years. And I think sticking to the old way of doing things, which is more relationship driven, sort of handshakes and meetings one-on-one, I think we're moving more towards a software driven approach, where we're looking at this bigger market, handling it much better, more efficiency, meaning you're not dropping, you have better dropping balls, you have a bigger coverage, and it allows you also to be much stronger as well in terms of providing immediate support, because you can utilize the same systems to help with recruiting, benchmarking, and all these other tools that our founders can now tap into.
That's awesome. Definitely going to ask you a few questions on that later. On that note, actually, to the people in the audience, feel free to use our Q&A feature on the right-hand side to ask your questions. We'll pick them up as we go along. So, Gyula, you're also the founding partner of Oktogon Ventures, also European focused, or maybe even a little bit more focused than that. Do you want to tell us a bit more about Oktogon?
Yeah, sure. It's a really small, early stage, what we call operator fund. and we are exclusively focused on teams coming out of Eastern Europe, and Eastern Europe can mean a lot of things. In our case, it means the ex Eastern Bloc countries who are members of the European Union, and basically we are looking for teams who are coming out of this region, either the entire team or some of the team, some of the founders, maybe the engineering team, and so forth, but are targeting a tier one global market, which in most cases is either the US or Western Europe, maybe Asia, but definitely not this fragmented little Eastern European market. And we typically write checks in the range of a couple €100,000 or dollars, and on top of the money, we basically contribute, our experience of having been there and having done that, and having gone through a lot of the growing pains as a founder coming out of this region, which I can attest to it is not easy, because it's not necessarily in our DNA to be at successful companies and to think big in terms of what our market and opportunities are.
So when you say an operator seed fund, is that what you mean by that? Like, you've been an operator before and you think you can apply that to your portfolio and use that to some effect?
To some effect, yes. I think there's an important distinction to make there, which is I'm not interested in being an executive in any of these companies. I would screw it up because I'm not there. It's not my vision to begin with. So it's not our business to replace founders in any function. Our business is to be whatever they need. If they need us to open doors, we open doors. If they need us to consult someone on how to deal with co-founders because they've never done it, we can help with that. If they need help with key hires, we can help. If it's their first time raising money or raising money at a certain stage, then we can help. So it's really more of a investor, coach, advisor, and maybe it's just hands off.
Cool, awesome. Well, you're both focused on Europe. I mean, Gyula, you're more focused on Eastern Europe, but I guess a question here is why Europe? I mean, Mattias, do you want to take it first, as you're a bit more kind of broader?
Yeah, I think it's a really unique period. I definitely believe that we're in a golden in Europe. The numbers kind of speak for themselves. There were 16 new unicorns minted in Q1 compared to 15 for all of last year. 20 million was invested into Europe in Q1 compared to 40 billion last year. So we've done half of what what we did last year in a quarter. And then I think this is set to continue because we also have exits worth 21 billion euros in Q1. And if you compare our sort of GDP, global GDP, which is 25% of world trade, to the amount of money going into Europe, it's only counts for 13% going into tech sort of venture. So yes, it's hot. Yes, it's unusual times, but I also think that it can continue for a longer time than we think. There's obviously going to be ups and downs, but the general trend is really strong, and it's been growing for about 20% for many years now. And I feel that we're hitting an inflection point, which has caused a sort of shift. And I think it's been helped out by COVID, because I think we're also seeing a death of geography. And so Zoom investing is becoming more of a norm. We're seeing international investors coming in at many different stages, but mostly focusing on the Series A and beyond. And I think Europe has become sort of the next really interesting region for them, where they think they can find some of the next great companies. And there's some that are just growing really nicely. And as we've seen UiPath has done extraordinarily well in Eastern Europe. Is a good example of a Eastern European company just killing it. But across Europe with Klarna, Adyen, Spotify, they're 60 billion valuations, and I don't think that they're all going to just stop there. Some of them will just continue to grow. So, yeah, why Europe? That's one bit, and then I think we have great academic institutions. We've always had that. We've had a history for decades, centuries of having fantastic universities. Have produced some of the most Nobel Prizes in the world are coming out of Europe, and the Industrial Revolution was really started here. So there has been a pause, I think, and I think it's time now that Europe sort of takes the stage a little bit more than what they've done in the past.
And I guess the question here, though, is some of these numbers and kind of summary of recent progress. How does that kind of compare to the US market, for example?
Yeah, the US is also doing really well, but we're as a market, we're growing faster. We're the fastest growing out of US, China, and Europe. Europe is the fastest growing, and of course, but the US, they have such an amazing history, and that's not things are not going to stop in the Silicon Valley, and the depth of talent, the amount of capital that's there is just unbelievable. So yeah, they're growing as well, but we're actually growing faster.
Awesome. Gyula, I think this question is going to be coming, but why Eastern Europe in particular?
I think it's a function of multiple things. One is we can see that there's a growing demand and recognition from established international investors for the region. Like when I first raised money in the US, and I, in my pitch, I described how our engineering team is based in Eastern Europe. Some of the VCs were just surprised. Why put it there? Why not Israel or Russia or India? Where you have quantities and qualities, and they were not getting it. And now it's very, very difficult to go to one of these geek pubs and not meet people from companies like TransferWise, Cloudera, and so forth. They discovered the talent in the region. So on one hand, it's not a crazy idea to say that you have most of your team based here. You also have business proof points, like Mattias said, UiPath, and some other great stories. We have a lot of proof points from investors coming here, Excel, Creandum, Partech, and a number of other investors have become very active here. And also, I think there's a very aggressive competition for quality deals globally, and VCs who are finding themselves in a really fierce competition in the US or China are also looking outside to here, among other places. And frankly, our value add is probably the strongest here. If I started an early stage fund in the US, it would be number 25,001. But here we can have a unique experience which can add a lot of value for our portfolio companies. So that's why.
So Gyula, how did you answer the question back in the day when investors were asking you about why you were founding your business in that region? How did you answer that question before?
In our case, it was a very easy and specific answer, because back then video streaming was an extremely niche thing. But I got lucky because an unrealistic proportion of the experts were concentrated in my hometown, Budapest, which of course was a function of the adult industry, which unfortunately this region is also infamous for. But technically those are just bits and bytes, so we could take advantage of that.
That's really interesting. I think. Go on, Mattias.
Yeah, it's just really interesting. The unicorns are coming from 16 different cities across Europe, and if you look at like European talent when it comes, education and engineering and STEM students, like I would say every country in Europe actually has a really good program, a strong program. And so if you bring it all together, we're actually producing more STEM students than what the US is doing. And so we do have, the mass. And really, it's been experience that's been an issue. It's whether the people have had the experience of working at fast-growing companies and understand what's required. What is now being sort of solved, because we're getting these very big companies, and they're not only are we seeing big companies, but they're being created faster than ever before. So they're hitting $1 billion or 5 billion or 10 billion faster, and these are numbers that were inconceivable many years ago, like, or 4 or 5 years ago, and now 10 billion is like, yeah, that's totally possible. And I think that's the mindset change, that people are like, okay, look, I if I'm going to get involved in this, I want to build something that's even bigger. And so you have another generation that comes out, and they want to be doing, success breeds success. Ultimately, that's what's causing it.
Are you seeing that? I mean, you were saying, Mattias, about the talent coming out, but maybe not the same level of like operator experience that you'd see in terms of the talent pool in the US. You'd be potentially doing it for a longer period. Is that changing now? Are you seeing like repeat founders, and you're seeing people who've been there, done that, scale companies now doing more stuff in Europe?
100%. Like it's a big difference. Like I think, and having been working in the European ecosystem now for 20 odd years, what we had was sort of foot soldiers and a couple of captains. Now you're talking about 5-star generals who really know how to build, like massive organizations and handle that and drive great businesses. And they're peeling out of all of these successful businesses, and they've learned from the last generation of founders, and they're like, okay, great, now I want to be building my story. So it's really exciting, and I don't think it's just the fact that they want to have that celebrity status. They're actually noticing that there's opportunities, and they're like, hey, I want to fix this. And those are the type of founders that you want to be backing. The ones that are passionate about it, have a sort of deep belief, and want to charge ahead and make it happen.
Awesome. I think one thing Gyula was saying as well earlier was around kind of competition, competition for deals heating up, and seeing investors from outside of Europe getting involved as well. I think you both spoke to remote/Zoom being kind of a new, obviously an emerging trend because of COVID. How does that look at the moment then in terms of deals being completed in Europe? Are they most typically with investors that are in Europe, or are you seeing a lot of like outside money coming in? Gyula, do you want to take this one first?
Yeah, we are seeing more and more outside money coming here. Like for instance, the largest company in our portfolio at the moment is a company called Bitrise. They are a CI/CD software as a service company, and a little more than a year ago, they raised 20 million from Partech, who I guess are, French plus US at this point. And we can see that, it doesn't really matter anymore that this company started from this region. Like Bitrise, for instance, now has offices in London and in the US as well. So at this point, Hungary for them, yes, it's still a significant portion of their headcount, but it's also becoming an origin story for a global company. So I think that's more and more the viewpoint that big investors take.
Yeah, cool. Definitely seeing that as well. Like more international engagement. I think at the Series A, for a strong company that's performing well at the Series A today, I would be surprised if they didn't have 50% of their possible investors coming from the US, for example, which before I would see more like 20% maybe. So I think there's been a big shift over this period. At Seed, you're seeing more interest, but not at the same level. It's not as there hasn't been as much aggression, which makes sense because it's a little bit earlier, a little bit more local. But yeah, I think the concept, again, like the concept of geography has disappeared, and people are not thinking about where they're from, and even the buyers of these software, as you talked about, like you can sell via Zoom really well, and nobody's like thinking about, so where actually is the location of this business? And some of them have actually fared a lot better because they're just as close as everybody else. There's no requirement to have that in-person meeting over this period, right? And so they've proven that they can actually drive sales sometimes even faster in this environment.
And Mattias, are you finding, like, in terms of your day-to-day, like how are you finding like the Zoom experience of actually investing and talking to founders?
Well, I love it, right? So I think it's great. I think it gives everybody a lot more freedom, and it allows us to be a lot more efficient. Today, I'm here at an office in London, meeting up with founders. That's lovely too, and I think that the relationship that one has during this process is, you go through a lot of hardships. There's a lot of ups and downs, and there's a little bit of like that team that you want to high five and really feel the emotional side of it, because it is an emotional journey where it has its highs and it has its lows, and I think we want to share that with each other, and doing that in person. But it becomes very different. I think offices are not going to have the same function, at least for me. They absolutely won't. They will be more a meeting place where probably more eating and drinking and socializing at that level is going to become more important, and getting to know people, than the sort of meeting room concept of running through lots of meetings one-on-one. That can be now done by Zoom, and it's done just as efficiently, and it saves time on both ends.
Awesome. And I mean, Gyula, you were working remotely before, with Ustream. I think you met was it your co-founder that you met remotely, or you worked remotely to begin with?
Yeah, we as co-founders actually met remotely, and throughout the years, my base was here in Budapest, and I worked with San Francisco, with Tokyo, which was a true hell in terms of my schedule. Yeah, I'm pretty used to it, and luckily in 2020 we were at the point where we had the tools and the bandwidth to be productive this way. So frankly, I'm with Mattias on this. I'm not excited to go back to doing everything in person. We're just saving so much time for ourselves and the founders. Some things are nicer in person, yes, but a lot of things actually work over Zoom.
That's really interesting. Another thing that you guys both have in common with your funds is that you're focusing on the very early stage, not just obviously the shared European factor. Why have you guys picked super early stage? Mattias, do you want to take this?
Yeah, so I think it's underserved in Europe. I think if you compare both the number of companies, and by the way, it's really hard to know how many funds there are in both Europe and the US, but US, from when I speak to a lot of LPs who are better insight into this, they say there's like 900 plus funds. I think in Europe we maybe have 400 in the sort of earlier stage. And of them, we don't have as many who have a reputation of, generations of billion-dollar companies created out of them. And whereas the US, you can probably name 10 to 15 that have done that. So it just hasn't had the love, I think, and it's becoming a really important segment of the market. And so that's part, like, just structurally. But I also just love it. I've worked in late stage. I've done that part. It's also fun, but there's nothing better than supporting somebody right at the beginning, seeing the whole road, helping them out on all kinds of things, from recruiting, sales. There's so many different facets that you can get involved with. So for me, it's by far the most fun. Like, there's nothing more exciting than helping a founder when, to be honest, it's really when they do need your help. It's the hard time. Whereas the other part, it's kind of like you're just adding a little bit more machinery to the whole thing. Awesome.
Gyula, what's your take?
We went with early stage because we felt that that's where we can make the biggest difference. When you're still not fully established as an organization, when you're still creating your leadership team, when you're still creating your processes, how you set your objectives, how you track them, how do you sell, what's your go-to market like, how do you hire seasoned people, and we help our companies to put these things in place. And frankly, by the time they have it, they're probably raising a Series A or B from somebody much larger. And at that point, we are happy to be in the background and let Bartek and the other big guys do the fancy board meetings. So yeah, I feel we can add the most value in early stage.
Awesome. And Gyula, how do you, in your mind, how do you go about assessing opportunities, the startups and the founders? What kind of dimensions are you considering when you're looking at these things?
I think the biggest question we're asking ourselves when evaluating the person who is the founder on the other side is this person or they going to go all the way, come hell, come no matter what. And it's very difficult to get somewhere that you can't even imagine going to. So, and honestly, you kind of need to be irrationally driven and a little bit naive, I guess, to imagine that you will get there. And I think it takes a special characteristic in a person. So that's the number one thing. And everything else, market, team, technology, but it's a long, painful journey, and you really need to be wanting to go all the way.
I mean, Mattias, one thing you were saying earlier about was your kind of the idea of this automated system, or potentially this AI elements to kind of assessing kind of some of the opportunities. Obviously, Gyula's talking about the character of the founder. Like, do you think, how do you see these systems working, and do you see any limitations with them, or how do you see it kind of playing out for you?
No, absolutely not. I mean, I think we will continue to sort of evolve these things. But like what we're doing is we're not reinventing things necessarily. Like, we're doing the same thing we did before, but we're augmenting it, or what I call sort of putting on the bionic suit to allow us to do things even more efficiently at speed. So it's the same process. For us, we look for for us, evaluation of the founder. Part of that you can assess through what they've done in their career and what they've done in the past, and you can see, okay, look, this is somebody who can hustle, run through walls. Obviously, potentially technically extremely competent, because we know what they're doing is very difficult, blah, blah, blah. But then, you meet them and you might see something that you haven't seen before. So I think that, I see like our software is kind of like just being another partner in the room, and there's things that they can do that sometimes are better than we can do. And then there's sometimes things we can do that's much better than they can do. So it's never going to be just one part of it that's dominating it. And particularly when you're dealing with events that we're trying to look for, right? We're trying to look for a black swan type of event, right? And that, of course, is not going to be something that you can put in a very clear box process.
Awesome. Okay, cool. I mean, so we've just spoken about assessing these opportunities, new startups, and we also talked about how investment is coming from outside of Europe. I guess I have a question around the startups themselves actually assessing people who want to invest in them. Like, how should a founder assess people that are looking to invest in their business? What type of things should they consider in your mind? Mattias, you want to go?
Yeah, the first thing that everybody says is take references, and I think that's what you do. You call the different portfolio companies. You try to meet people that know them. But then I think that it's also about this whole courting process. You can assess to see the level of trust, openness, transparency that you have, and the honesty. All of us are fallible, and all of us have views on different things. And if that comes across in a way that people feel, okay, look, this is somebody that I can really believe in and trust, because this is probably a more important decision than I would say even your marriage, right? Because sometimes this thing is going to last a lot longer. So you're going to need to make sure that you make the right decisions with the people that you have around you. It's very hard. You can divorce somebody. It's very hard to get rid of an investor. It's super hard. It's almost impossible. So make sure you find the right person who can take you all the way.
Anything to add on top of referencing Gyula?
Just going back to when I was a founder, the way I thought about this, and I still think founders should, building a startup is difficult. If your business is struggling, it's difficult. If your business is booming and you suddenly need to scale 3-4x every year, then it's difficult. There are a lot of growing pains. And, what is having this person in my corner going to give to me? Does he have a reputation that he's a shady guy and he's going to replace me the first moment he doesn't like something? I probably shouldn't have him. Does he have a reputation that he has a lot of money but not a lot of added value? I probably shouldn't have him unless I really need to. Or does he have a reputation that he can add a lot of value in many areas of my business aside from just giving money? That's probably a good investor to have. So I would think about it like that.
Thanks, Gyula. Well, I'm aware of time, so I guess if we can wrap up, but it'd be great if you could both just quickly recap kind of the sectors that you're investing in, and maybe what's the best way for a founder in the audience to get in touch. Gyula, do you want to go first?
Sure. We are sector agnostic, but I will say that we tend to have a strong bias in our investments for all things software service, B2B. I know it's boring, but that's where I come from, and that's also where the strength of this region tends to be. And my email is Gyula, my first name, at Oktogon, OKTOGON.VC. And you can also submit pitches through our website. So there you go. You can find us.
Amazing. Thanks, Gyula. And Mattias?
Yeah, so we focus on, like I said, finance and capital, which is fintech, future of work, e-health or tools helping healthcare software or the healthcare system, I should say, and then gaming and community. We focus on Europe. We do pre-seed and seed. We invest between $100 and $1.5 million, and just email me at Mattias@moonfire.com.
Amazing. Thank you both so much. Really appreciate the time. That was invaluable.